Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hi everyone, welcome to lecture number 39, the first lecture on labor market dynamics in India. So far in this course, we have discussed about the evolution and growth of labor economics. We discussed the overview of labor market, the interaction of demand and supply. Specifically, we discussed about the labor supply, how the individuals they take the decision of hours of work. Also, we discussed some policy implications on labor supply, welfare programs and the work incentives. We discussed about the labor demand. We discussed about the employment decision in short run and long run by the firm. Further, we discussed about the labor market equilibrium. We discussed about the labor market outcomes in both competitive and non-competitive environment. We discussed about the impact on the labor market outcomes by the policies like payroll taxes and subsidies. Under non-competitive environment, we discussed about the labor market outcomes in monopsony, monopoly. Further, we discussed about the human capital, the role of human capital in labor market and its outcomes. We discussed about the rate of return to the schooling, the rate of investment in education. Then we discussed about the wage structure, the wage differentials, and also we discussed about labor market discriminations. Further, we discussed about labor market mobility both in terms of domestic as well as international, and what are the factors that affect this decision to migrate from one place to another for the worker. Then we discussed about unemployment, we discussed about how it is a problem in all economies and different types of unemployment, and we discussed about the natural rate of unemployment, the steady state rate of unemployment. We discussed about some behaviors of job search and how the policies, the unemployment insurance affects the job search behavior of the individuals. So, we discussed so far on these aspects of the labor market theories and certain applications. In this lecture, we will discuss about the labor market dynamics in India. We will take into consideration all these aspects of labor market and discuss particularly in the context of Indian labor market. We will discuss about the employment, unemployment and labor force dynamics, how it has evolved over the period of time, how the structural changes has happened in the economy both in terms of output and employment. Now, before getting into the labor market dynamics in India, let us discuss some of the concepts and definition how we measure employment, unemployment and labor force in India. So, the entire spectrum of economic activities, human activities falls into two categories. One is economic activities, another one is non-economic activities. So, individuals they perform different wide range of activities in their day-to-day life. So, some of the activities are economic activities and some of the activities are non-economic activities. Any activity resulting in the production of goods and services that add some value to the national product is considered as an economic activity. So, for the employment and unemployment, such activities are included like production of all goods and services for the market, like pay or the profit. Doing those activities, the workers or the individuals they get some reward, which includes like government services also. Second category of economic activities includes production of primary commodities for own consumption and own account production on the fixed assets. So, these are the activities comes under economic activities, and they comes under this while evaluating GDP or national product, we take into consideration these activities, and these activities are considered as economic activities. Then the term economic activities is defined in employment and unemployment. It includes all the market activities performed for pay or profit which results in the production of goods and services for exchange, and non-market activities. There are certain non-market activities. When we talk about non-market activities, all these activities relating to the like agriculture, forestry, fishing, mining, quarrying sector, industry division from NIC classification, national industry classification, if you take into consideration, these activities results in the production of primary goods for own consumption. Like it also includes free collection of crops, forestry, firewood, hunting, fishing, mining. So, all the activities which comes under these categories for own consumption, they are non-market activities. Further activities relating to the own account production of fixed assets, like which includes the production of fixed assets including construction of own houses, roads, wells and machinery of tools. For household enterprises also construction of any private or community facilities free of cost. So, a person may be engaged in own account construction in capacity of either a labor or a supervisor. So, these categories comes under non-market activities, though these are economic activities, but these activities are not in the form of a kind of exchange in the market. So, market activities and non-market activities comes under economic activities. Now, when we measure this employment unemployment status of an individual, first we look at the activity status. Activity status means it is the activity situation in which a person was found during a specified reference period with regard to the person's participation in economic and non-economic activities. So, with a reference time period, let us say 1 month, 1 year. So, in that reference period, how the individual is engaged in both economic and non-economic activities, that defines his activity status. And according to this, a person could be in one or combination of following 3 broad activity status including that reference period. First is that working or being engaged in economic activities, means he is engaged with some kind of work. Second category is that being not engaged in economic activity or work, but either making tangible efforts to seek for work or being available for work. So, in that sense also he is considering some kind of activities which leads to find some economic activities. Third one is that being not engaged in any economic activity or work and not available for work. So, first category he is available, he is working. Second category he is not working. Third category he is not available for working, not engaged in economic activities, not working. So, based on this activity status, we can define an individual that either he is employed or he is unemployed or not in labor force. Labor force means it is the summation of employed and unemployed. He is available for work. If he is working, then he is employed. If he is not working, he is unemployed. But if the person is neither working nor available for work, then he is not in the labor force. Further, if an individual is working or means employed, then category of employment. Category of employment, he may be employed in self-employed category, or he may be employed in a regular wage or salaried employee, or he is a casual labor. So, we will discuss about that how we measure in Indian context, that how we define that someone is employed, someone is unemployed and someone is not in labor force. When we are talking about that workers they are employed, means persons who are engaged in any economic activity or who despite their attachment to economic activity absent themselves from work for reason of illness, injury or any kind of physical disability, or bad weather, festivals or social religious functions, or the congeners of necessitate this temporary absence from the work, these constitutes workers, means individual they are employed. However, this unpaid household members who assisted this operation of any economic activity in the household, farm or non-farm activities were also considered as workers. So, in Indian context, if the person comes under this category, then we consider him as employed. Second category is unemployed. As per the economic activity status, he is unemployed, means a person who is owing to a lack of work, had not worked, but either sought work through employment exchange or intermediaries or friends or relatives, or by making application to the prospect employers, or express their willingness or availability for work under prevailing condition of work and remuneration, were considered as those who are seeking for or available for work. They are seeking or available for work, but they are not working, means they are unemployed. So, both employed and unemployed category considered as the labor force. The persons those who are either working, means they are employed, or seeking or available for work, means they are unemployed, this constitutes the labor force. And not in labor force, outside the labor force, means persons those who are neither working nor seeking for or available for work for various reasons during the reference period were considered as not in labor force. So, not in labor force category could be considered as like this: the students those who are they are neither seeking for any job or they are not working. So, students are out of labor force. So, there are so many categories which are considered they are out of labor force. Further, when we are saying somebody is employed, different category of employment, like self-employed, a person who operated in their in his own farm or non-farm enterprise, or is engaged in independently in profession or trade on own account, with one or few partners also, were deemed to be self-employed in the household enterprise, like own account workers, employers, helpers in the household enterprise. They are considered as the self-employed category. Regular wage and salaried employees, these were the persons who work in others' farm or non-farm enterprises, both can be household or non-household, and in return they receive the salary or wage on a regular basis, not on the basis of daily or a periodic renewal of the work contract. So, they are considered as the regular wage or salaried employed. The another category of employment is that casual labor. A person who was casually engaged in others' farm or non-farm enterprises, this can be either household or non-household, and in return he receives wage according to the terms of the daily or periodic work contract, was considered as a casual labor. So, there are three types of employment, category of employment. It could be self-employed or regular wage employed or casual labor. Now, different approaches were followed to determine the activity status of the person. Now, if the person is surveyed, were classified into various activity category in three approaches. One is current daily status, current weekly status, and the UPSS status. So, these three approaches on the basis of economic activities pursued by the individuals specify their activity status. So, these three approaches are usual status approach, current weekly status approach, and current daily status approach. The reference period for these three categories are different. For UPSS usual status approach, the reference period is 1 year, which means an individual is asked that what are the economic activities you have done with the reference to the last 1 year. When it is considered current weekly status, the individual is asked that what you have done in last week, and when it is comes to the daily status, it has been asked that to the individual that on the each day of the reference week last week, what are the activities you have done. So, First approach takes into consideration the long term employment unemployment status of the individual, whereas the weekly status and the daily status takes into account the seasonal unemployment or the short term unemployment and employment status of the individuals. So, the activity status of a person in usual status approach, the activity status of is determined on the basis of the reference period of 1 year, whereas in for the current weekly status it is determined on the basis of 1 week, and for the current daily status it is based on the reference period of 1 day with reference to the last week. Now, this is how we can measure the employment number of people, those who are employed or unemployed or those who are in the labor force. When we consider the workers, we take into consideration the labor force participation rate and the workforce participation rate. So, labor force participation rate is can be derived by taking into consideration the number of employed person plus number of unemployed person divided by the total population multiplied by 1000. So, it takes into consideration the labor force participation rate. Similarly, worker population ratio takes into consideration number of workers, number of employed persons divided by the total population multiplied by 1000. Whereas, take into consideration the proportion of unemployed, means number of unemployed, it is number of unemployed person divided by total population into 1000. And when it comes to unemployment rate, it takes into consideration that on total number of unemployed persons divided by the labor force, means number of employed person plus number of unemployed person multiplied by 1000. So, we have three categories. One is workers, who means those who are employed, unemployed and not in labor force. We take into consideration how we can estimate this workforce participation rate, labor force participation rate and unemployment rate. Now, with these concepts, let me give you some data on Indian economy on the status of on these different aspects and the key indicators of labor market. Before getting into these key indicators of the labor market, labor supply comes from the population. So, if you look at the population pyramid of India in 2011 and the projected population pyramid in 2036, you can see the graph. Now, in 2011 it is showing you can see the number of population, particularly you can see from let us say let us start with the 15 to 59 age group. Now, you can see this is the productive age group, this is the percentage. When it comes to the India and young population, now you can see the magnitude of the population from 15 to let us say 40 or 29, the youth population we talk about. So, now you can see the magnitude of the population in particular different age groups in 2011. So, that is why we are saying that India is having a big demographic dividend, and the projected population pyramid in 2036, you can see how it is going to change the age group, the population structure is going to change according to the age group. Now, you can see 15 to 50 age group. So, mostly we are saying that India is having a demographic dividend. So, population is the major contributor to this labor force, and you can see the labor force participation according to their age group. So, from there we have taken the 15 to 59 age group. We are considering that this age group is the working age group, and if you look at the magnitude, now how it has changed, the demographic change has occurred over the period of time. We have taken from 1991 data to 2018. Now, you can see how this 15 to 29 age group, this demographic structure has changed. Now, you can see the absolute number in million, it has just doubled and more than double in 2018, and you can see how it has changed over the period of time. So, we are saying that youth bloc is there for Indian economy or Indian labor market. Also, you can see the age group which is 30 to 40, they have also increased from 153 to 369 millions in number. And so, the most of this working age population is within this 15 to 44 age group, you can see. So, this is the demographic structure. It has changed over last 40 years of time, and mostly it has opened an demographic dividend window of opportunity for Indian labor market. Now, how this labor force and the workforce participation rate we have reported in last 40 years of time, you can see. In the total 42% we are having the labor force participation, and the workforce participation is 41.1 in 2023. The data is extracted from PLFS data, latest PLFS data, and you can see over the period of time, the only concern you can see the male labor force participation, it was consistent around 55-56%, whereas this female labor force participation, which was 30% in 1983, it has suddenly reduced over the period of time. It has reduced 22.5 in 2011-12. However, in 2023 you can see it has increased to 27.8. However, this female labor force participation, it has declined over the period of time, and in the recent past decade it has been observed that it has increased. But you can see the data, it shows that female labor force participation is quite low. Same is reflected in the workforce participation. The male workforce participation is consisting around 53-54% over the period of time, whereas the female workforce participation, it has declined significantly, but in 2023 we see the data, it has increased to some extent. So, this is the distribution. This is one of the key aspect of Indian labor market, is that the female labor force participation is low. If you compare with the data with the other countries across the globe, many of these developed countries, they have higher female labor force participation when we compare with India. Another key indicator is that the unemployment rate. You can see the unemployment rate as per three different categories of activity status. The open unemployment is roughly around 4%, and when we look at this distribution, rural, urban, male, female, you can see the variation is there. But when we go with this UPS approach or UPSS approach, it is just 3.3% or 4% roughly, whereas when we go with this CWS approach, current weekly status approach, then it comes 5%. So, in India, unemployment rate is, the open unemployment rate is very low, which is one of the characteristics of many of the developing countries in the world. But this poses some questions that there could be some kind of other issues related to labor market, like underemployment. So, unemployment percentage is very low because of the nature of the economy. So, it is being a developing economy, most of you can see the per capita income is very low. So, as we discussed, if you remember, the poor, they cannot stay for a long time as unemployed. So, their discount rate is quite high. So, therefore, even if they do not find that much of ways, still they get into the work. So, that is why the labor market reflects a very low rate of open unemployment. When we talk about this labor force and the workforce participation rate, means how many percentage of the people they are employed and how many people are unemployed in an economy, we need to see that how economy has performed over the period of time. Now, if you look at the data, the growth performance of Indian economy, except few in 2008-9, you can see the data graph, and this is the growth rate of GDP, annual growth rate, and you can see only two time periods where 2007-8 was the financial crisis, then 2019 and 2022 the COVID. Other than these two major shocks, Indian economy has performed well over and above of a 6% growth rate. If you draw the data, then it has shown a decent economic growth over the period of time with a 6 to 7% growth rate. So, when we talk about this growth is also reflected in the labor market, how this growth is translated into the labor market, creating certain jobs, whether it has happened or not. Let us discuss about some of the aspects while considering the structural changes, the growth and the labor market performance together. Now, if you look at this graph, as we have seen that Indian economy has performed well in last 30-40 years of time over the 6% growth rate. Now, the sectoral distribution, which sector of the economy contributes to this growth or the change in the structure of the economy. Now, you can see the primary sector was contributing 30% in 1993. In 2023, it is roughly 18.19%. The contribution of finance, insurance sector, this has increased. The contribution of manufacturing, the contribution of hotel, trade, transport, the contribution of transport, communication. So, service sector mostly is contributing, and the primary sector, this contribution of primary sector, it has declined, and roughly you will find that contribution of this secondary sector is stagnant. So, the contribution of primary sector, it has declined, the contribution of service sector, it has increased, and the contribution of the manufacturing sector or the secondary sector is almost stagnant over the period of time. So, in the process of development, the structural transformation has happened in the product market, the share of output, it has changed, the composition of share of output it has changed. When we look at this through the labor market, now you can see the structural change, how it has happened in the labor market. In 93-94, 63% of the workforce, they were employed in the primary sector. It has come down to 46.5% in 2023 data. So, similarly, you can see the other sectors in the service sector and also the manufacturing sector. Manufacturing sector employment is almost stagnant over the period of time. The primary sector employment has reduced, but the change is very low. The share of service sector employment has increased, but again it is the way it has happened in the product market, the way it has happened in the GDP distribution, the same has not been reflected at same pace in the labor market. So, the structural transformation in the labor market is very low, and another thing is that the whatever the change is happening, the structural transformation is happening, it is happening from a primary to service sector, bypassing this manufacturing sector. So, manufacturing sector employment is quite stagnant over the period of time, and the kind of employment which is going from agriculture to service sector, mostly it is going to construction, it is going to hotel, trade, transport, it is not going to the most productive sectors like finance, insurance. You can see the finance, insurance, real estate business, their contribution to the employment is very low. These are the sectors which are very productive sectors, transport, communication, finance, insurance, real estate, but the share of employment is very low. So, the transformation is happening from agriculture to construction, trade, hotel, transport and business, these sectors. So, the conclusion is that the structural transformation is happening, it is but the in the labor market also, but it is in a very slow pace, and it is not going to directly to the finance, insurance, real estate and most productive sectors. So, if you look at the growth story of Indian economy since 1980s, India has experienced a high economic growth since the mid of the 1980s, and particularly since 1991 after this new economic reforms were introduced. And with this, the liberalization of economy, the growth rate accelerated. Mostly it has happened in 2000, early 2000, 2003-4 was the period where the growth rate was at peak, and in some years it has exceeded to 8%. But after 2008 the growth rate substantially declined due to the global financial crisis, and we have seen that during the COVID pandemic also the growth rate has declined. Now, despite of these disruptions to the economy, the overall economy has achieved an average of more than 6% growth rate, and India is among the fastest growing major economies in the world. Currently, the world's most populated country and the fifth largest economy in terms of dollar terms, and India is expected to have this sustained economic growth of 5 to 6% in next 15 years or so. So, it is expected that India will do well in next 15 years, in another 20 years of time. It is also projected that India is going to be the third largest economy in the world by 2027, and also it is expected to touch gross domestic product of 7 trillion by 2030. So, India's growth story, it has benefited from the demographic advantage. We have a young population and huge investment in digital public infrastructure. A large expansion of in the physical infrastructure, reforms of the goods and services taxes, and better service deliveries. So, thanks to adoption of the technologies. So, these are the factors have promoted the growth story of Indian economy. So, government resources have also increased due to increase in the tax revenues. According to the current estimates, the Indian economy grew at 7.3% and 7.2% in 2022 and 2023 respectively. This is the Government of India data in 2023. So, the high growth, it has led to some of important changes in the Indian economy and society. First, the level of absolute poverty, it has declined significantly. The absolute number of poverty, it has declined significantly, and there has been improvement in the living standards as well as other social and human development indicators. Although we have a very low human development index, but it has increased over the period of time compared to other developed countries, but it has increased over the period of time. But no doubt that this absolute poverty has reduced and the standard of living has increased. Then economic growth had some positive impact on the labor market conditions. So, it has not led to a radical structural transformation in the employment conditions, but it has increased the level of income of the people, and there has also been seen a slow and steady decline in the share of agriculture. So, as I said, the structural transformation is happening, but it is happening at a very slow pace, and there is a rise in the share of service sector's employment to the total employment. So, structural transformation, this is one of the positive aspect on the labor market structural transformation. This has happened because of this, the growth dynamics has changed, service led economy, our economy is leading by this service sector. Now, we are giving focus to the manufacturing sectors to have the, it should be the hub of employment. Other than that, we can characterize several characteristics of Indian labor market. The observed growth pattern has been different from the experience of other developed countries, where manufacturing sector was the main driver of growth in earlier stage of development. If you remember the stages of economic development, it should move from primary to secondary, secondary to tertiary sector. In India, the growth has been led by the service sector. Although the share of agriculture in the total employment has declined, it has largely shifted to service sector. As I said, the data is also showing the same, which counts around 23% of the total employment. Agriculture still counts 48% of the total employment. Then, if you look at the Indian labor market is mostly highly informal in nature. Around 90% of the workers are informal in employment. I will show you the data in my next lecture, that the degree of informality that exists in Indian economy. Although the percent of the regular workers has increased over the period of time, this is also a good sign that regular workers has increased, the share of regular workers has increased, the share of formal employment sectors has increased, and in that formal sector the regular employment has also increased significantly, but still there is a large number of employment is there in the informal sector. Mostly the persistence of self employment is another feature of Indian labor market. The self employment continues to constitute about half of the total employment in the economy, which is indeed a highest percentage. And the labor market is highly segmented in India. It is segmented in different categories like gender, location, occupation, social groups, geographical regions. Although the gap in earnings across the gender and other social categories has declined over the period of time significantly, the broad socio-economic hierarchies to access employment, education, earnings are still there in the Indian labor market. And recently the open unemployment is very low, as I said it is 2 to 3%, roughly 4%. The low unemployment rate is an indicative of the lack of livelihood opportunities, and it is common, as I said, it is one of the common feature to the most of the developing economies, but we need to understand why it is very low. Then another feature is that low female labor force participation, it is roughly around 25%. So, India is one of the lowest female labor force participation rate in the world, which is reflection of its considerable gender inequality in the labor market. So, considering these are some of the features of Indian labor market, in our next lecture I will discuss about the decent work, how the different categories of employments are there, how entire workforce is divided between this self-employed, regular and casual employment. Also I will give you some figures that how there is a the labor force as per their educational attainment, means how the skill mismatch is there in Indian labor market. I will also give you some of the figures that how the structural transformation has happened, but this structural transformation leads to the kind of decent employment it has created in Indian labor market. So, also I will give you some of the employment challenges that Indian economy is going to have, and also how to address these some of the employment challenges through some policy agendas. Thank you.